Hello gamers and welcome to Game Warp. I'm Elwood.
I'm Kim.
And this is our feature review for Firewatch. Firewatch is a first-person adventure game that takes place in the American state of Wyoming in 1989 as you take the role of Henry, a fire lookout who's assigned to a tower in the Shoshone National Forest. And basically when we join Henry, he's suffering a number of issues in his personal life and is basically looking to find an escape in the wilderness from his problems that he have in his life, in particular his wife's diagnosis of suffering from Alzheimer's. Now, this is a game which has, since its release, has received praise both from gamers as well as critics alike, picking up numerous awards, including the Best Indie Game at the 2016 Golden Joystick Awards, as well as Best Narrative at the 2017 Game Developers Choice Awards, and the Best Debut Game at the 2017 British Academy Games Awards as well. As of the end of 2016, the game has sold over 1 million copies, even though it has received strong criticism from Steam players criticising its length, and also led to a loophole being exploited where gamers were buying the game and then returning it within the return period because the game is that short. But this is certainly a game which has been bounced around and certainly been one that we've been wanting to look at really for quite some time, so it's been good to obviously finally now be able to sit down and play this. But Kim, I mean, Firewatch has obviously been, as we said already, it's been high on the radar for some time, really. And now we've obviously had a chance to sit down and play it. I mean, was the wait worthwhile? I mean, did it live up to the expectations that you had going into it?
I think it's hard to say, mostly because there's really two sides to it. On one hand, I feel like it did in various aspects, but I feel like I also felt a little disappointed. My initial, everything starts with your first impression of going into a game, and I feel like I had a lot of frustrations when I first started the game, mostly because of my own incompetencies, but it's also a heavy game mechanic. So, I don't know, did it live up to your expectations?
It was hard to say what my expectations really were going into this one. I mean, obviously I was aware that it was being praised by both gamers and critics, as we've said already. So when you go into a game and like this, and certainly was the case when we looked at Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, there's this kind of worry in many ways that, is it going to be too overhyped? Have I built it up too much in my own mind? Certainly the issue of the length, I was worried that, this game's clocks in around 3, maybe 4 hours at the most. Are we going to be able to get a satisfying story in such a short amount of time, especially for walking simulator, which are kind of notorious for needing that longer period of time to sort of build up? I mean, they take their time, and certainly Firewatch is kind of the exception, especially as a walking simulator, in the fact that this is actually quite a fast-paced game in terms of the story. The story builds and rolls along at quite a quick pace, unlike your character who obviously just walks around this national park and interacts with different situations, be it that you're trying to stop a bunch of campers lighting fireworks at the start. I mean, it all starts off very innocent and you're just basically doing your job as this park ranger, trying to stop people starting fires and keeping track of things, and then it slowly takes this dark turn.
I would argue it wasn't too dark. I would argue that it wasn't too slow. Just for the fact that, we quickly knew something was odd there were some odd characters really quickly at the end of, say, day one. We already had a good idea that, we had some teens messing around, and, our watch out tower was broken into, and we don't know who did it, and there was a lot of stuff, and then there was a mysterious man shining a flashlight at your face, and at the end of day one, we already had a really good idea. Things got dark really quick, and while like the game spans over 79 days of like pretty much over the summer, it's really, the main focus is that like in pretty much like a third part, it's really a speed of getting to know Delilah and the other, which is the main other character that we interact with and talk with, and it's really there that we really build a relationship. We start picking up on little things that's happening and like kind of clues on certain issues that have arisen, but we never I guess in a certain way it did take its time where we felt like, we were falling into a comfort zone before like kind of slipping back to kind of like a more darker sort of plot.
That way as well, the fact that we obviously have these dark elements, we said already about the mysterious man who's watching us, the tower being broken into, and it builds up really nicely, and then by the time we get into like the final quarter, it feels kind of deflated because it doesn't live up to all this expectation. We expect this big payoff, and it just never really delivers. It's sort of like you get a resolve to the mystery, but it's sort of like, meh. It didn't feel like the payoff I wanted. I think I was expecting, I don't know, a little more conflict or something, but they just never came.
But I think this has to go into the scope of an indie game where they didn't want, because I remembered when we talked to another dev and we were talking about designing NPCs and making them exist in games are actually complexity in themselves because of just all the elements you need to think of. And I feel that might be one of the things that factored in where, we have a lot of invisible characters. So, like, Delilah's there, but we never meet her. We never really get to see her. We only get to interact with her from afar. We see her tower in distance, but we never really, know who she is. We never, even, like, when we were, like, stopping the teens, we only saw them in the distance. They were like little shadows in the distance and that sort of thing. And as the story goes along, what makes it deflated is the fact that it's easy to guess by before the end. You have a really good idea where the story is going now. There are still a few surprises in the second half, but it's never enough. I guess the fact is, I feel that they put too much story arc into it. You got the teens, you got the guy, you have someone, and I think that's the thing is they were never able to flesh out any of these storylines, so they had to kind of like abruptly wrap it up for something, particularly the teen plot, and that sort of thing is. It felt like, Firewatch would have merited actually having those days to really explore the forest, see bears and, actually see things. And, there are a lot of hidden gems that you have. And I guess you could really take the time to explore. But, I mean, the story moves you so fast and propels you so fast that, there are so many things that happen that you kind of expect, you go into a cave, you go in, and then now you're like, okay, well, it's obvious they're going to slam the gate on you. So you're kind of like, well, these things are all expected. These are very familiar tropes, and I feel that that's what happened with the second half, which doesn't have that freshness of the first half, is that first half was a lot of exploration. It was a lot of discovering, Two Forks and all the different areas and mapping things out and, seeing the beautiful visuals and the area you're in and really getting all this in while getting to know Delilah. And in the second half, while it escalates, it also seems like it doesn't have that pacing that it had in the first part.
Yeah. I mean, just to obviously touch on the relationship that Henry has with Delilah, I mean, it's very similar to the relationship we see between yourself and Atlas in BioShock. And this relationship, this just the whole time you're just communicating back and forth through walkie-talkie, and depending on the dialogue choices you make, I mean, your relationship can be very flirtatious with Delilah, and as you go over the course of the days, you see this relationship grow between them, and it's really interesting the fact that, as you mentioned, Ray, we never actually see Delilah. We just obviously have this whole relationship carried out over walkie-talkie, and just these two characters who they're the only company that is in this wilderness is this friendship that these two characters have. And as we see it obviously develop, and the fact that the only sort of idea that they have of what each other looks like is sort of the descriptions they share, and I thought it was kind of charming, and the little jokes that they share as well, such as like when you find the turtle and they name it after Burt Reynolds.
I actually wasn't able to find the turtle. I had heard about it, but I had no idea where to find it, so I didn't end up finding it. So maybe like I feel like Firewatch is something that like there are a little bit of hidden gems everywhere, like I said. So it really takes a lot of discovering, and I think this leads me into two of the kind of like issues that I had. And one of them is the fact that you have all these narrative choices, and it feels like it would craft into a much more, appealing ending. And this is the same criticism I had for Life is Strange, where you had all these things that can impact your ending, and you really just end up having two. You really have two routes, and I believe Firewatch also only has two endings that is possible. And I feel like, it probably is because of the length and because of the budget and all that stuff. I mean, aside from that, my main thing with it was obviously like what I mentioned in the beginning was my lack of competency with this. Is that it took me a while to learn the map, and reading the map is such a key element in this game that I feel like the beginning of the game had that frustration where I kept getting lost. And like I kept going the wrong direction, and it was just a major pain.
Yeah, the map is the map here encounters the same issues as when you play like Metro, in the fact that the map doesn't like come up onto your screen. You have to essentially move your viewpoint so you're looking at the map. So there is it's gone for this very realistic sort of hand movement to look at notes and maps and things, and it's a bit of a pain to get used to, especially when you first start out. As for the actual dialogue choices, and I feel that with Life is Strange, though, I felt that your choices felt that they paid off more. It affected the routes and how you would achieve different objectives. Here, though, essentially we just all end up with the same objective. I think the only sort of difference is how you interact with Delilah, really. I mean, it doesn't change the course of the story, and I think this is very much the case, especially when we look at the Telltale games. In particular, we have all this emphasis on this going to create these huge changes, and it's what it perhaps gives us a little bit of different cutscene. Certainly when we looked at the Batman Telltale game, it just basically changed the appearance of certain characters, really, rather than changing anything major with the outcome. And I feel that this is very much the case again with Firewatch. I mean, it doesn't really change anything. It's more just how you choose to see yourself playing the character. It's what it really changes. So and in terms of gameplay, it's not really changing anything. It's more just an illusion that it's going to change something. And to go back to what you were saying about payoffs, especially in independent games, I thought even when we looked at Everybody's Gone to the Rapture, we still had payoff there. We've had those big moments of when we found out what happened to certain characters, and even if they're giving it us in a cutscene, which is what I expected with the Stranger, who's obviously harassing us over the course of the summer, we would have something other than, I've just decided, I've had enough harassing you, I'm just going to wander off now. Which is basically what it boils down to, is thanks for that, thanks for ruining my summer.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's the thing is, that's the issue. I think that's one of the main issues, is that the ending was so anticlimactic, and on top of that, while you did all this, you burned down the entire forest. The cause of the fire was someone had set a fire or something, right? That was the suspicion they had. And now it was after two fires had converged together, that was why they had to leave. And this is a big deal, yeah, you're in the middle of nowhere, but this is a big deal. And all you get is some guy saying, now I'm going to wander off and do something else, and then all these things, the resolutions are just so unsatisfying, I find. I don't know. I mean, I guess what it is I wish the game was a little longer, it would have been able to flesh out a little bit more of the story and kind of give us a little bit more content to work with.
Yeah, it seems to be missing something. I think when we look at the forest, it's very pretty to look at, and it's very nice to wander around, and perhaps did maybe want to go off and work for the forestry service. But at the same time, now we're obviously discussing it, I did notice there is a lack of any wildlife in this forest. The only time we encounter wildlife is when we encounter a dead elk. And that, again, is just purely there just to add to the paranoia. Anything.
Yeah, I mean, like, we heard bear noises, and we were tracking that bear, and we never actually saw one. I think in one of the hidden achievements is you can find, like, a raccoon or something.
Yeah.
And then you have your turtle, and sometimes you see butterflies fluttering around. But, yeah, you don't really see any particularly a lot of... Like, there's not even bunnies, you know? Like, you'd expect at least the wilderness would have some hopping bunnies somewhere, you know? But I feel like we're really like crapping on the game a lot, and I don't want people to misunderstand that like Firewatch is a bad game. Like Firewatch, you can feel that there's a whole lot of heart that was put into it. The attention to detail, even like the sound design. As you're walking and hiking around this map, you really get the sense that you know you're in the wilderness. There's like a lot of subtle sounds that are going on around you. And there's kind of like in various moments when something is about to happen or you're heading into some area where something else is going to go on, the soundtrack that they accompany with it is really nice. It really like helps build the mood, and those things are done really, really well, especially because they do play around with like different times of day. So sometimes you're out in like during the entire daytime. Sometimes you're in the evening and you can talk about the sunset. And sometimes you can talk about, you know, you're at night and you walk around and there are different things. And you know, I feel like they do try to, you know, give this place a life of its own, as in like, you know, there were people who were there before and, you know, and that sort of thing. It just falls a little flat in terms of the story, where it doesn't ever get to be as much as it should be.
I mean, it's certainly an exciting game, and it's certainly worth the critical praise it's received. Where it's not the sort of game that I could see myself returning to now I've finished it. I didn't feel that there was anything to really bring me back for another walk in the woods. It's one of those experiences, much like Everybody's Gone to the Rapture. It was fun to play through and to certainly experience, but there's very little to bring me back. And I'm not sure what could actually be changed really to create this sort of experience that would make me come back. I mean, you pretty much can see everything on your first run through. Yes, there are little bits to discover, such as the boxes scattered throughout, and you can find the different books and trinkets that have been left behind for you. But it's it's, as I said, it's the sort of game that you will play through probably once. And then maybe return to after a longer period. It's not the sort of game that you want to play it again as soon as you finish it. It's a very self-contained experience, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean that's not exactly a bad thing. I think I don't feel like they intended for you to go back and play it a ton of times either. Especially like, you know, a lot of people will go back for achievements, but this game doesn't really have that many hidden achievements. I think there's like maybe like 10 or whatever. So there's not really, I don't know, I mean, I feel like the experience itself is well enough for what it is.
So what are we going to rate this one then?
What are we going to rate this one? What would you rate it?
Oh, it's so difficult. I mean,
I'm somewhere around a 3.5. I'm somewhere around a 3.5 and a 4.
I would, for the longest time when I was playing this, I was like, oh my god, this is like a 4-star game. I'm rating this like 4 stars, and then we got to that ending, and I was like, oh, is that it? And for that, I found myself scraping some points off. So for myself, just purely because the ending doesn't pay off on the journey that you undertake, I'm going to give it a 3.5.
I feel like I'm going to give it a 3.5 also. I really, for the main reason that I like story-driven games. And I feel like the story in this one really fell flat. There has to be some sort of, like, you know, my main thing with this is that this is a walking simulator sort of game. So walking simulators are supposed to be very story-driven. You have narrative choices, you have all these elements that really work, and you can really see, like, this potential that it could have been really, really mind-blowingly good. But because the ending really falls flat, and the fact that they, you know, there just doesn't seem to be enough events to make it more memorable, is where I am at right now.
Yeah.
So yeah, 3.5 is where we're at. This wraps up this episode. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. Head over to our home base, thatmomentin.com, to read gaming reviews. To get updated gaming news and releases every single day, follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook at Game Warp Podcast. You can also hang out with us. To see all our gaming obsessions, you can find us on Instagram, Game Warp Podcast, and you can also hang out with us over on our Twitch channel, where we stream at Game Warp Podcast. Till next time, bye!